So my family and I went to Martha's Vineyard a few summers back. And Martha's Vineyard, for those who don't know, it's a small island off the coast of Massachusetts. Massachusetts is actually shaped kind of like an arm sticking out in the ocean, and there's a couple islands that are just south of the elbow. Martha's Vineyard's a really popular destination vacation to go to if you live up in New England or if you just like that part of the country. And you take a ferry to get over there. And we actually were staying at a place called the Beach Plum Inn, which is this really nice little sort of cottage-style inn where they have these little cottages all around a property that's up on a hillside in a little town called Menemsha. Interestingly, the harbor for Menemsha is just down the hill, and you can see it very well from there. And it's actually the harbor that they used when they shot the movie Jaws as the Amityville City harbor. So there's the scene in the movie where they go out into the ocean. It was shot right there. And there's a little beach right next to the harbor, and we had just walked down the hill. It was real easy to walk down to this beach. And so my wife and daughters and I had spent the day from probably about 10 o'clock in the morning until about 4 o'clock in the afternoon just hanging out down at the beach. And we had just walked back up the hill, and there was a little horse pasture on the hill, so we kind of had to walk around the horse pasture, and there were wild turkeys all over the place. The whole island is covered in wild turkeys. So we'd come back from the beach, and it was kind of that time of day where we were going to maybe take a little nap and maybe jump in the shower. And so my daughters were outside, and I just kind of sat down in a chair on the porch and fell asleep. And, it was just a perfect kind of beach day. And my wife had jumped in the shower. And a few minutes later, my daughter, I heard her come like stomping up onto the porch really quickly. And she was like, Daddy, there's a man with a thingy in his ear. And I was like, what? I'm not really sure what she means, but also at the same time, this was the same week that President Obama and his family were visiting the island for vacation. And so Secret Service had been all over the island. And I was like, is there a Secret Service agent here? This is a very strange situation because we were in a very private, isolated piece of property. And so I walk outside, and standing there on the porch is this man in khakis, and he's got a polo on, a very clean-cut, military-looking young man. And sure enough, he's got a thingy in his ear. And I said, hey, what's going on? Kind of, this is kind of a funny situation. And he was all business. And he was like, sir, what can you tell me? Do people come up this hill? He started asking me logistics about the property. And so I immediately thought, wait a minute. And I said to this young man who was clearly Secret Service, I said, are you Secret Service? And he wouldn't specifically answer. And I said, are the Obamas coming to dinner here tonight at the inn? And he said, I can't answer that question, sir. And he asked me a few more questions, and I explained, I said, this cottage, we're not actually a separate private piece of property. It's part of the inn. And then he got the idea that, okay, we weren't, we were associated with the inn, and we were having dinner in the inn that night. And so I said to him, listen, I've got an 8:30 reservation in the dining room tonight. Are you telling me that I'm going to be eating with the President of the United States tonight? And he finally said, yes, the Obamas are scheduled to eat here tonight. And then within 10 minutes of that, there was a swarm of Secret Service agents, 80 to 100 different guys, bomb-sniffing dogs, sniffing all the cars in the parking lot, guys with sniper rifles that just literally disappeared into the woods. So the whole place just became a mob scene of Secret Service agents and guys in military dress who were part of the Secret Service or not, it wasn't clear. But we were excited because we're big fans of the Obamas, and we'd spotted the motorcade moving around on the island a couple of times and waved, but we were actually going to, be in the same room with Obama, and that was pretty cool. So, and my kids, they were young at the time, and so we were like, hey, well, let's see what they're doing. Let's go outside and watch the Secret Service. And, as soon as we walked out of again, we were in a little standalone cottage, but we walk out of the cottage and three guys walk up to us with the wands and they wand us. And then we walk around the corner of the building and a couple more guys say, come over here and wand us. We got wanded by the Secret Service probably a dozen times in the first half an hour that they were there. But then we watched them out in the parking lot, and they would go around to each car with 2 or 3 different dogs and sniff for bombs, and then they would have one of the Secret Service agents would actually get up on the bumper of the car and bounce up and down on it, which, if the car were laden with explosives or something, the suspension wouldn't react correctly. So basically they were just standing on people's cars, bouncing up and down on them, which I thought was interesting and kind of obnoxious at the same time. So it started to get to the time where we knew that our dinner reservation was for 8:30, and we were told the Obamas were going to come at 8, and it was about 7:30 when we got outside, and we're like, okay, they got to be coming, and this inn is down a little gravel road, so it was just a one-lane kind of gravel road that led into the parking lot, a small gravel parking lot, but you could hear this convoy of vehicles coming, and the first couple were like sort of military type vehicles. They actually have a vehicle that travels with the president that all it does is knock out like radio signals. It kills cell phones. That way you can't trigger any explosives. And then not just one presidential limousine, but two. They use two identical presidential limousines, and you're never supposed to know which limousine he's actually in. But they came pulling in the driveway, and we're standing right there, and it's funny because the Secret Service, they completely help Obama get out one side. Michelle is absolutely on her own getting out of the other side. She has to open her own door. She has to walk around. She doesn't get the protection he does, she does get protection, but not like he does, certainly. So we saw them go in, and then we went back into our place and finished getting ready for dinner because we wanted to look our best because we're going to have dinner with the president. And so we go into the inn, and we were actually guests of the owners of the inn for this week that we were there. So the manager knew us quite well, and he was actually at the host stand when we walk into the dining room. And we walked into the dining room, and just right across the way, 15, 20 feet away, there was Obama, and there were a party of four sitting at his table. And the table right next to them was empty. And I said hi to the manager, and he was like, we're going to get you a really good table. And I'm like, well, what about that one right there? And he goes, no, we can't. The Secret Service said we have to leave that table completely empty. And I was like, okay, that's fine, We ended up actually sitting outside just at a patio table that was literally about 5 feet away from the Obamas. They were just inside this doorway from us. And it was a very interesting experience because, getting enclosed in that bubble is this weird, it feels a little violative at first, but then you kind of fall into it and you're like, wow, we're inside the presidential protection bubble where we are right here. And then we proceed to order dinner, and that night's special was prime rib. And so the waitress gets to me and she's like, well, what are you going to have? And I'm like, well, what did Obama have? And she said, oh, he had the prime rib, medium rare. And I said, I'm having the prime rib, medium rare. And it was just a fantastic experience. The Secret Service, the interesting thing was they were dudes who were obviously Secret Service. And then there were guys that were like, there was a guy that was in a ratty T-shirt and torn pants and a trucker hat. But he was Secret Service in disguise. And the funny thing was we were seated outside, and he was actually positioned he could have been sitting on an apple box, but he was actually sitting on a 5-gallon bucket turned upside down. But he just looked like some yahoo sitting by the back door of the restaurant. And in reality, he was a Secret Service agent to make sure that they'd know what was going on, coming or going from that rear entrance. And there was one point where I stood up because I wanted to get a good photo because Obama was just seated a couple feet away from me, but I couldn't quite get a photo at the angle I wanted. So I stood up and I started to turn towards where he was seated, and I could hear this guy, the Secret Service agent, he was about 30 feet away from me. He goes, "Sir," and he was still seated. And I got up and I turned, and I was clearly holding my phone. Like, I got nothing but my phone here, and I'm going to take a picture. And he raised his voice again. He said, "Sir?" And I was like, what, dude? I'm just standing up to take a photo. And then I got myself into my final position, and I heard him say "sir" to me one more time, and he had stood up, and I just took the picture, and I looked at him like, dude, I'm just taking a picture, So that was me almost getting arrested by the Secret Service. But they finished their meal, and then it was really amazing to see the president work the dining room because he knew, and Michelle knew, they all knew that everybody wanted, hey, a handshake or a hug or just a hi or a hello, and he couldn't, individually shake the hands of everybody in the building. But he did pay particular attention to the staff that was working there. He went back in the kitchen. He spoke with all those people. He had pictures taken with all those folks. Michelle, it was funny, there was this little kid that was sitting at the table right next to us, and she had just kind of randomly stood up and walked over and was just chit-chatting with them. And the little boy goes, "Can I have a hug?" And she smiled, and she said, "Of course you can, sweetie." And, the whole dining room is watching, and then everybody just was like, "Oh," and there was cheering and happiness. And But it was a wild experience, and it all started with my daughter telling me that there's a man outside with a thingy in his ear.